But out of the corner of my eye, I see my son swinging alone in the backyard. And suddenly I had this further realization that not only was everything I owned not making me happy, even worse, everything I owned was actually taking me away from the very thing that did bring happiness into my life. And not just happiness, but fulfillment and purpose and contentment. This is a very different realization, and I think it is the very foundation of minimalism. The very foundational truth that would cause anyone to intentionally own less stuff is this reality is that not only are our things not making us happy, they've actually become such a burden on our lives that they are actually taking us away from the very things that we would prefer to be living our life for. Hence the subtitle of the book, Finding the Life You Want Under Everything You Own. I ran inside and I told my wife about it, and she's like, that sounds pretty good. She's been scrubbing toilets all day, and so she was very much drawn to the idea. I remember going online and reading about all these different people that had pursued this minimalist lifestyle and realizing that they were all doing it a little bit differently. I read about Logan and Tammy Strobel. They lived in Portland. They live in this 200 square foot tiny home. I read about some people who had sold everything so they could travel the world. A guy named Colin Wright, everything he owned fit in a backpack. He moved to a new country every 4 months. And I remember reading about how they were living this minimalist life and being drawn to the idea of owning less, but not particularly attracted to how they were doing it. And by that I meant I had no desire to move every 4 months to a different country. I kind of liked my country. I kind of liked my neighborhood. I liked my relationships. I liked the people that were involved in my life. I liked my kids' friends. I liked our neighborhood. I didn't want to move every 4 months. And I looked at the way the Strobels were living their life in this 200 square foot tiny home. They owned just 100 things between them. 2 forks and 2 cups and 2 plates and 1 cat, and they had just 100 things. And I'm like, I can see why they were drawn to it. They were drawn to the freedom. They were drawn to getting out of debt. They enjoyed being able to pick up and move and go anywhere they wanted. But I thought to myself, well, first of all, I have 2 kids. Like, I have a family of 4. So I need at least 4 cups. I need at least 4 forks. But more than that, we enjoyed having people into our home. I was working at a church at the time. We had a number of different small groups that were meeting. We had 3 different groups of people that were meeting in our living room each week. I was doing some premarital counseling. We enjoyed having people over for dinner, talking not just about the wedding, but about marriage afterwards. And I suddenly realized that if I was going to pursue minimalism, it was going to look very different for me than it looked for anyone else. Because my values are very different. Or the thing that I want to accomplish, the purpose that I see for my life is different than anyone else in the world. And ultimately, this is what minimalism is. It is about identifying our values. It's about intentionally promoting the things we most value by removing anything that distracts us from it. This is minimalism for anybody. This is a rational approach to owning less. The goal is not to own the fewest amount of things as possible. The goal is to own just the amount of things you need to live a life that matters. Actually, that was the original title of the book. Only What Matters was the original title of the book until I got bored with it, and so we changed it. I called my mom that night, and I said, Mom, she lived in South Dakota, halfway across the country. I said, Mom, you'll never guess, we've decided to become minimalists. And yeah, she didn't laugh, she groaned. I was like, oh. And literally on the other end of the line, she says, oh, Joshua, I was just watching Oprah. She was interviewing some minimalists. Did you know that they don't go to the grocery store, but they get their food out of dumpsters? And I thought, no, I don't remember reading that anywhere in the literature. My neighbor did not mention that I had to get my food out of dumpsters. I've since come to learn that there are a group of people that have decided that they're not going to spend any money on food. They grow their own and forage. They're called freegans, different than vegans, different than minimalists. But because of that conversation, literally, I started a blog that night. Becoming minimalist was a decision that we had made. I decided it would be the name of the website. I started it for only one simple reason, a bit to journal what I was getting rid of and what I was learning, as well as to make sure my mom knew that we were still buying FDA-approved produce for her grandchildren. I think we had 2 readers that first month. I didn't think my wife was reading at the time. But now we have over 1 million readers every single month that come by Becoming Minimalist, because the draw to own less, right? People are drawn to this message. You're here because this resonates, right? This resonates with so many people when we're so saturated. We're like in a society where we're just drowning in our possessions. And when someone, I think, throws a life preserver that there's a better way to do this, we're drawn to the message. One of the reoccurring themes on the blog is I started noticing very early on how my life was improving in some very practical ways, how I started owning less in some very real ways my life was getting better. And so let me have you do this. First of all, wherever you are, inside here or outside on the patio, turn to the person next to you and just introduce yourself. So introduce yourself to someone new sitting around. You go ahead just for a short minute. Okay. All right. Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful. This works in Canada? It's a Canada thing? Okay, wonderful. Now that you're all friends, turn wherever you are, groups of 2 or 3, and then here's the question for you. How would your life improve if you owned less stuff? Some of you who may be down the road a little ways could talk about how your life has already improved. Those of you who haven't even started or even considered the idea, the question is, if you own less stuff, in very practical ways, how would your life improve or get better? Go ahead and just take a minute or 2 and kind of chew on that for a second. Fantastic. Okay. Wonderful, wonderful, well done. What do we got? What did you come up with? I had a list of like 26 at some point, but some of them were doubles, so I'm down to like 21. But what do you got? What came up in your groups? Yeah. Less time cleaning, right? More time available for whatever it could be in life. And it's almost more than just the cleaning, right? It's the cleaning and the organizing and the managing and the maintaining, the researching and the fixing and the removing, or even all the time we spend working just to earn the money so we can go shopping to buy the thing that we can bring home to clean and organize and manage, maintain, repair, replace, right? In many ways, we become nothing but stuff managers. Like this is what we're doing with our lives. We're just managing more and more stuff, and then we, for some reason, want more and more of it. So good one. More time, okay?
More emotional peace. So I get personally claustrophobic in a very cluttery environment.
Yeah. More emotional peace. An interesting one. Let me kind of jump on a tangent for this. First of all, like it's very calming, right? Very, very peaceful, very calming. Randy Alcorn says every increased possession adds increased anxiety onto our lives. This is true in like a large life sense, but also just like sitting in a room, right? If you kind of close your eyes and put yourself in the most cluttered room in your home, and then close your eyes and put yourself in the most like tidy room in your home, like you can feel it on your shoulders, right? It just feels nicer. Emotional peace, at my first stop, actually my second stop in Tucson, Arizona, someone was sharing, a guy shared a story from the back, and he said that he was holding on to a lot of his mother's and father's stuff. And he kind of shared the story how they had both died when he was a teenager, very, very tragic death. And he was holding on to so many other things. And he said when he found minimalism and he began going through all of those things that he was keeping and why it was so difficult, he said, I realized that holding on to all this stuff was stopping me in the grieving process. That I got to this point and I couldn't go any further, and I just had to hold on to all the things. And he said, as I began releasing those things and getting rid of them, I found myself like really coming to terms with what happened to my parents. So when he said emotional peace, I was like, whoa, we're jumping in deep quick. But I wanted to mention that. Okay, more time, more peace, less stress. Yep.
In terms of clothing, I think that a lot of people tend to hold on to different sizes of clothing, which could have emotional negative feelings as well. And with simplicity wardrobe, you're spending less time keeping a fix. You probably will have more items that fit inside.
Yeah, a couple thoughts there. Less decisions, right? Fewer decisions. Man, I always get hammered. Less, fewer decisions. And also there's Francine J, a writer. She wrote a book called The Joy of Less, and she talks a little bit about decluttering the fantasy self. She talks about as we remove some of those items of the person that we wish we were, we're able to finally live the life that we have and be the person that we are. And that looks not just like clothes, but also someone came up to me one time about books. And they said I had the hardest time getting rid of books. I had shelves and shelves of books that I'd never read, and I couldn't declutter them. And he said, finally it dawned on me why I couldn't get rid of them. He said, it's because I've always wanted to be a reader, but I'm just not a reader. He's like, so I would always buy books that I wanted to read or I thought I should read, and they just sat on my shelf kind of haunting me of all the not just the misplaced money, but all the information I could. But he said, I finally done, I'm just not a reader. I process information a different way. So how about a couple more?
Control of your finances.
Yes, there you go. More control of our finances, more money available, not just less money buying stuff, but less money taking care of things. And then certainly more money looks very different to different people, or at least costs less to live. So some people, this means getting out of debt. Some people, this means finally able to get ahead in savings and build up an emergency fund. For others, it means they're able to leave the job that they felt trapped in because of the paycheck, and they're able to find a new life that costs less, but they're able to do something more meaningful or something that they find greater joy in. Fantastic. Let's do one more. Yeah.
Space.
Yeah, more space. In America, the average American home has tripled in size in the last 50 years, and yet we still have to rent off-site storage to keep all of our stuff, right? It's very interesting the amount of space that we think that we need to have. Maybe we don't need more space. Maybe we just need less stuff. Interestingly enough, in America, probably in Canada too, our homes have never been bigger, but our families have never been more broken. It's just very interesting when you think of that. Some others, better for the environment. I'm sure you're just about to mention that. Good. Better example for our kids. Having kids makes minimalism more difficult, but having kids, I think, makes minimalism more important. Because they're watching us and they're noticing what we're spending our lives doing and pursuing and trying to accumulate. So we become a better example for them. I think we find more contentment, we find more gratitude, we find more generosity. Ultimately, we have more time, we have more money, we have more energy, we have fewer distractions, less stress, more freedom. We have more opportunity to pursue our greatest passions, however we want to define them. This is the promise of minimalism. Not that minimalism in and of itself makes us happy, but that minimalism lays the foundation for us to finally pursue the things that actually do bring about happiness and fulfillment in our lives. I'm going to talk about intentionality, but my dear friend Cait Flanders is here, and I want to have her come up and share her story a little bit, because her story is one of unbelievable intentionality and taking steps to kind of challenge consumerism and consumption in her life. CaitFlanders.com is her website, so bookmark that while she speaks, and I'll give her the platform for 5 or 6 minutes.
Hello. Is this hey? Good. No? Nah? Oh, now yes. Good. No? Oh, I'm getting a yes. Oh, okay. So you guys can hear me if I talk loud enough? Okay, cool. So my name's Cait Flanders. I'm a Victorian native. So I write a blog right now. It's called Cait Flanders. For the last 5 years, it was called Blonde on a Budget. I started originally because I had about $30,000 of mostly consumer debt that I was completely maxed out with. And I built that up over years of doing a lot of mindless spending. So I started the blog sort of like how Joshua started his. It was totally meant just for me to read, not for anyone else. For the first 6 months, like all I was posting was these weekly spending reports. So I was literally just keeping track of my spending and knew where my money was finally going. And it was great. And in 2 years, I paid off all of my debt. And you would think that that would have been a great jump start for like a really successful future, because I'd sort of just proven that I could, get rid of all of my debt. I had achieved this huge financial goal, and I'd learned how to live with less money, and I didn't spend a lot of money in those 2 years. In fact, for parts of it, I was, putting up to 55% of my income towards my debt every month. So it was pretty drastic, but I'd proven it. And instead, I went back to spending money, because the problem was that during those 2 years, I sort of felt deprived. Like I felt like I couldn't have things that I wanted, and it just didn't feel good. So I went back to spending. And I didn't go back into debt, but I just started spending my money again. And it was kind of what Joshua was talking about, like being paycheck to paycheck, but also the more money you get, you just start using it. You could put it towards other financial goals, and I unfortunately didn't do that. This went on for a year, like the first year that I was debt-free, and it was awful because So because I write a personal finance blog, at the beginning of every month I used to write, these are my numbers, these are my goals for the month, and I would always say I want to save 20% every month. And then I would get to the end of the month, and I would be lucky if I'd saved like 5 to 10%. And I would write all these little excuses, right? Like, oh, things came up, and I just found reasons to spend all the money. It didn't feel good though, and I didn't like publishing that, and that's sort of the scary part of personal finance is I was very public with all of these numbers, but it didn't feel good. Yet somehow I let it go on for a full year, and then one day, it was actually this time 2 years ago, I was living in Vancouver at the time, and I was over visiting family, and we're all sitting around, and my sister, who was 20 years old, is she's telling us that she'd just bought some $500 camera or something, and as every good family does, you poke a little bit of fun at someone and say like, oh, should you be spending your money on that? And she looked up at me and she's like, well, I save 20% of my income every month, so I can do whatever I want with the rest. And you know what though, like as a big sister and as someone who's talked a lot about finance in front of her, I was super proud of her, but then I turned it back at her, and all of a sudden I was like, but do you need 80% of your income? Because she's a university student, she lives at home and doesn't have a ton of expenses. So I'm like, do you need all that money? And then I truly don't remember anything she said to me, because all of a sudden then I had that light bulb moment where I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. How am I giving my sister this advice? Like, how is it okay that I'm, being a bossy big sister and giving her this advice, but I'm not taking it myself? And so I went home and I'm thinking about it, and I don't really know what's going on. I'm like looking around my place and realizing like, where's all my money been going? And I can physically see it all around my house. Like I can see, again, what Joshua was talking about, like all the stuff I'd wanted to do. So like I owned like 50 books I'd never read, and I am a reader, but I used to do that thing on Amazon constantly. Like I would think of one book that I wanted, immediately go to the site, put it in the shopping cart, then you'd see some that are related, and you're like, well, I gotta add one more because I gotta get $25 to get free shipping, right? And I would do this, honestly, probably every single week. Like I think I had 2 books delivered to my place every single week for years. And like I would love to tell you that I read 2 books a week, but I don't do that. And so I had all these books, I had cameras from when I thought I'd like get into photography, I had professional clothes that I thought like smart and professional Cait should wear. And I just had all this stuff. And I had boxes. In 2013, through like a bunch of different circumstances, I moved 5 times. And all I did was literally like pick up the box from the closet, put it on a truck, and then go to the next place, put it in just in a closet. I'd never unpack them. And so when you move that many times and you see how much stuff you own that you don't actually touch unless you move it, it was crazy. And so all of these things came together. I had never heard of what I now call a shopping ban. I'd never heard of it before, and I didn't even know what it was until I started writing out the rules for mine. So I decided that, in looking around my place, I could see, like, I had, when you, like, go in the bathroom cupboard or, and you can see, like, I need, like, one thing. Like, I need a razor, and I know I have one, but I also seem to have, like, 30 bottles of lotion and shampoo and conditioner and gel and, like, all this stuff that I never use, and why can't I find that one razor? So I'm looking around, and I'm like, I have everything I need right now. There's nothing more. So I decided I only wanted to be able to buy consumable goods, so like food, gas for my car, stuff like that, and I could not buy anything else. No clothes, no shoes, accessories, books, which was awful, anything for around the house, no, like girls will get this, like no like fun cosmetics, like no nail polish or things like that. Like I wasn't allowed to buy anything else for a year. And I can tell you that in truly of the full year, so I started this on July 7th of 2014, which was my 29th birthday. And the toughest part of the full year was truly just the first few months, because in that time I was dealing with what I would say were having to change habits, right? Like the toughest stuff to not buy anymore was the stuff that was built into me. Like buying those books on Amazon was built into me, right? Like, so how many times would that come up that I would think, oh, I want to do it. Oh, I can't. That sucks. And so I was constantly fighting those impulses and realizing I had to change that behavior. It also came up with takeout coffee, which I know is a consumable, but I was not comfortable with how much money I used to spend on it, so I added that to the shopping ban as well. And at the same time, I also decided, which sounds so weird now, I also decided that I was going to declutter and get rid of a lot of my stuff, because I could see I wasn't using it. it sounds weird because at the same time, I'm like, I'm not allowed to buy anything more, but I'm also going to get rid of all my stuff. And anyways, throughout the entire year, it started, I did one massive declutter. I got rid of 40% of my stuff, 50, 60, 65. And at the end of it, I got rid of 70% of my stuff. And I also, because as a financial blogger, I have to say the numbers, I went from living off then, like 90 to 95% of my income down to 50. And so it was obviously, I would consider it a huge success. At the end of it, I decided, this sounds crazy, I decided to do it for a second year. And that ends next Wednesday, and I'm really glad. Because it's been a really good challenge. What I realized when I did the first year was that the one thing I didn't do, which I wish I had done, just because I think it would be interesting, is I wish I had kept track of the things that I did buy. And I know this sounds silly, but like even the toothpaste or toothbrushes or stuff like that, like I was more curious about it like statistically and data-wise, like how many bottles of toothpaste do you use in a year? Or how many bottles of shampoo do you use in a year? Because at the end of the year, I want to be able to show that list and be like, I think I'm an average female consumer. This is what you could get by on, and you probably don't need to buy all this other stuff. So, but I am still glad that there's only one more week left, and that's my story.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question. Can you, I want you to expand on a point for me, if you can.
I'm sure I can.
Because when I read about people who do a shopping ban, not like a month or a couple weeks, but like for an extended one, you said that it was really difficult for a couple months. Is that true? A couple months, you would say?
Yes.
So can you expand on like did it get easier after a couple months? Help me understand it was really difficult for a while. Did something happen that made it easier, or did you just kind of ease into it? Did you have a realization? Expand on that one moment in time.
So I think that there are a few things. One is that I think it got easier after the first few months because the toughest stuff, like I said, was changing the habits. I realized I wasn't in a habit of buying clothes or shoes, but fully well knowing like everyone's vices are different. That might be your thing, whereas my thing was books and coffee, right? So. But for me, it took me about a few months to get rid of that habit, change that habit, and feel good about that. After that, it really became about realizing that I didn't want any of that stuff anyways, right? And again, you've sort of touched on all the points, but little things started happening. Like all of a sudden, I loved walking into my space. And I was like, well, I don't want to add anything more here now. Like I love my house the way it is, and it probably looks really empty, but yeah. I love it, and I don't want more stuff. And it freed up so much mental clutter for me. And just because I wasn't thinking about buying things. And even like I would hear friends, talk about, oh, I had this bad day and I just went shopping. And I'm like, wow, that is so not the way to fix it. Yeah. And it's so difficult though, and like hard to talk to friends about it unless they ask sort of for my advice, because I did it too. I did it for a long time, right? Like I totally used retail therapy to get through situations in the past. But I just realized like that's not going to help anything. I'd say like the greatest lesson, like if I could put something overarching for the whole thing, it would be that I've realized, because I went through some personal stuff too in that year. My parents got divorced, which was really hard, surprisingly on an adult child. It's very hard. Mm-hmm. And you go through all this other stuff, and so in those moments I did think about shopping, think about consuming in general. So I have something I've realized is really that whenever you think about consuming more, especially more than what you need, it's usually because something else is going on, like something else feels like it's lacking in your life, and you need to deal with that first.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Man, that leads so perfectly in what I wanted to talk about, because I think it's so much about intentionality, right? It's about living an intentional life. So much of our life is kind of in this drift. It's lived very unintentionally, and by that I mean when we started getting rid of our things, it took us about 9 months. We got rid of about 60-70% of our stuff. I remember taking a van load of stuff to Goodwill, and it felt great, and a second van load of stuff felt amazing, and a third one felt by about the fourth van load of things to Goodwill, I started asking myself some pretty difficult questions. Like, why in the world did I have 4 van loads of things in my home that I didn't need to have? Like, why do we, in the first place, buy more stuff than we need? Some of the stuff that Cait was hitting on. It's one of the things I think that separates how I write, or at least my approach to minimalism. It separates me from some of the other minimalist, simple living writers, is I think it is very unfair and very short-sighted to blame advertisements for all of our over-shopping, right? I mean, certainly, like, we see a ton, 5,000 advertisements every single day, and they all convince us, they all tell us to buy more, they all tell us we'll be happier, and certainly their message starts to seep into us, but they're not driving to the store, right? Like it's us. And as I began looking at all the things that I had bought and all the things I had accumulated, and yet I had this desire for more, like, I was forced to ask myself some pretty difficult questions. Like, maybe I am a little more jealous. Maybe I am trying to portray this image of success to the world. Maybe I really am trying to keep up with other people and compare my life to other people. Maybe I am more greedy. Maybe I am more selfish. Maybe I am trying to cover up certain holes or certain parts of discontent in my life with the things that I was buying. Maybe I really was trying to find happiness in the things that I bought. And this is a very difficult process, and I think it stops some people. I think some people stop pursuing minimalism when the questions get hard, but the good life is on the other side of those questions, and when we start to confront them and address them and wrestle with them in our lives. I was asked, the biggest fight that I'll give you a little inside the publishing world. The biggest fight I had about this book was the cover. They asked me when we started the process, what do you want on the cover? And I said, I don't know. I only know what I don't want. I don't want plastic chairs on a beach. And I said, I know you're going to want to put plastic chairs on a beach because they communicate calm and peace, and that's just not what I want. That's not what this book is about. And so we went about 6, 7, 8 months kind of back and forth. They sent me covers. I didn't like any of them. I hired someone. I sent them covers. They didn't like any of them. We went back and forth. Finally, like, the graphic designers were done working with me. We were getting really close to going to print, and I get an email from the CEO, like the main guy. Like, this is how bad this process became. I get an email on Friday afternoon from the CEO and said, hey, we're out of time. We're going to print. We need to settle on a cover. We've had to make an executive decision. Here's the one we chose. It's a Friday afternoon. I open up the email, and it is plastic chairs on a beach with an umbrella. Like, they made it even worse. And I emailed back right away. I said, can I call? We can't do this. Can I call? And I don't know. He purposely didn't answer or whatever. So I don't respond back. So all weekend long, I describe it as one of the worst, most difficult weekends of my entire life. This is how strongly I don't want that to be the cover, which I'll tell you why in a moment. Monday morning, I call my agent. I'm like, Chris, you've seen the cover. I don't want to do the book. Like, I believe so strongly that against this idea of minimalism that I don't even want to do the book. What happens if I don't do it? Do I have to give all the advance money back right away? Can I pay it back? Can I pay it back in parts? Do I get to keep the book and what's already been written? I can take it somewhere else. He's like, calm down. I'll make a call. So by the end of the evening, we had this new cover put together, thankfully so. I feel like I spend a lot of my time, or at least one of my main focuses with this book and with my writing is arguing against the idea of people using minimalism to check out of life. That people would embrace minimalism as a means to check out of responsibility, check out of work, check out of the life that they could be living. In many ways, it's not a book about organizing. I don't tell you how to fold your shirts better. Marie Kondo handles that far better than I do. It's a book about owning less so that we can live more. It's about owning less so that we can live a bigger life with the one life that we've been given. And I think that the fulfillment that we find lying on a beach every day for the rest of our lives is a little short. It's a little short-sighted. I think that when you sit across a table from somebody and you ask them, what do you most want to accomplish in life? That no one says, I just want to own a lot of stuff. That I don't even know how many people would say, I just want to lay on the sand under an umbrella for the rest of my life. When you really push and when you really get down, they talk about significance, they talk about impact, they talk about relationships, they talk about love and hope and peace and solving problems. That this is where we find fulfillment, in doing meaningful things with our lives. And minimalism lays the foundation for it. For living an intentional life, for beginning to challenge what are the motivations that I have in my life? Where has advertisers kind of steered me away, and where has society taken me down a road that I never wanted to go? And this is what I want to be doing. This is what I want to accomplish. This is the problem I want to solve. This is the life that I want to be living. Minimalism is not a pathway to checking out of life. I think minimalism is a doorway to a bigger life, lived more intentional. I got an email a while back from someone who they're kind of telling me the story of getting rid of things, and she said, I found minimalism a while ago and I was really drawn to it, and so I've decluttered all my kids and my spouse's stuff, and now I'm really kind of wrestling with my own. And she said, I got to my closet, and I opened up my closet, and I love my clothes, and I love all my shoes, and I looked at my closet, and I said, I don't even know where to get started. Like, I don't know how I can part with these things. She said, until just last week, I was driving downtown, and I drove past our city's battered women's shelter. And she said, I don't know, but for the first time, I noticed the sign, and I imagined what was going on inside the building. She said, I pictured all these women who had left their home, maybe in the dark of night, with nothing but the clothes on their back and their children in their arms, and they fled to the one place where they thought they would find, and they could find safety and security. And she said, as I drove by and I imagined the life that these women had gone through and the life that they were living now, and I pictured all the clothes that were in my closet, she said, for the first time, I wanted to part with my clothes because I wanted to give them to the women in the shelter. I knew that they could find more joy in them, that this would be such a blessing to them, and that this generosity, in many ways, I think, drives minimalism. I write in the book, people always ask me, should I donate or should I sell my stuff? And I'm like, if you don't need the money, just donate. Maybe the large things you can sell, but just donate. Find a local charity that you believe in and start giving your stuff there, because as you do, and you realize the joy that how your excess can become a blessing to other people, like it drives you to give more and more and more. Generosity is in many ways, I think, a driver of minimalism, but also I think generosity is the byproduct of minimalism. I think it's the most worthwhile byproduct of minimalism. That if I asked you, do you want to be a generous person? That what 99.9% of us say yes. I mean, maybe a handful of people don't want to be generous, but don't we all want to be generous? Not just with our money, but with our time and with our talents and with our energy. We want to help other people. We want to be a blessing to others. We just can't seem to find the space to do it. We can't seem to find the extra money. We can't seem to find the extra time. And gosh, I think the more that we remove ourselves from not just the accumulation of stuff, but the constant pursuit of more and more, we finally find the space to be generous. And that generosity compels us forward into greater and more minimalism. This is a book about owning less. It's a book about minimalism, but it's also a book about intentionality. It's a book about generosity. It's a book about how I've seen all three of those themes come together in my life based on one simple conversation with my neighbor where I feel compelled to play my neighbor's role in as many people's lives as possible. There's a few copies of the book. Always selling them for 10 Canadian dollars, which is cheaper than 10 US dollars, like the cheapest they've ever been. But I don't want to take them home, so let's do it. I'm going to open this up to question and answer, and we'll go back and forth for another 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll sign some books and invite the outdoor people in. But I am starting with the first question, and I have a question for Mike. I warned him that I get to ask the first question of the night. So come on up here. Mike Vardy, if you don't know him, he runs a website called the Productivityist.
Close. I need to make it minimal. I need to make it more of a minimal.
Just say it.
Productivityist.
Productivityist.com. And I've heard you speak several times. We did a podcast together when the book came out where you asked if you could buy a Tesla. Right?
I did. I asked if I could buy a Tesla.
But
my wife says no, by the way.
Okay, right. Easy enough. A few years ago, a gentleman named Greg McKeown wrote a book called Essentialism, which in many ways was applying minimalist principles to business, to our productivity. And so I wanted to ask you, since we know each other and your productivity, can you speak a little bit about how you have seen minimalist principles apply to productivity, whatever that looks like, whatever the life we want to be living? How can minimalism help spur that on in our lives?
Sure. So, how many of you in the audience here have heard of the book Essentialism before? Yeah. So if you're following minimalism, then that is, and I think it's more than business too. I think it's just tasks in general, like the time that we have and all that, because the stuff that we have isn't just the stuff that's physical, but it's the stuff that's up here and in our digital task apps and all that stuff. And so what I've seen in my decade of studying productivity is initially there was let's find tools that will help us do as much as possible. And then you cram those digital tools or those paper tools with as much as you can, and then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed by all the things that you have in front of you for a given day, so you don't do any of them. Or you do the little small things, the empty calories, the stuff that, you try to get your email to inbox 0 because that way you can count, look, I had 286 emails and now I have 0. And then you say, well, what were those emails about? 286. Like you can't really define them, right? So when Gregory McKeown came out with Essentialism, he basically bucked the trend of a lot of the more enterprise-oriented productivity methodologies where they said, hey, make as many lists as possible, have as many things on your list, look at the different elements of lists. He said, look, figure out, you're going to get overwhelmed by your tasks. So figure out what you really need to do and what you really want to do and get rid of the stuff that's kind of in the middle. And it does involve emptying out your head, kind of like emptying out your garage. You had to empty out your garage to kind of figure out what's there. You have to empty out your house. You had to empty out your closet to figure out what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. A great example would be with the closet analogy, and I use this with tasks all the time, is that this great site called Lifehacker, which is sometimes great and actually sometimes not so great. But Lifehacker had this tool that what people would do, it's a little trick where they said you want to get your closet down and you want to figure out what clothes you wear. when you start a brand new season, hang your clothes up with the open side of the hook hanging out. And as you wear each article of clothing, put it back on with the open side hanging in. And by the end of the season, you'll see what clothes you did not wear, because your brain will always go, oh, I wear that army fatigue shirt all the time. And then you find out 3 months later that you actually did not wear it in 3 months. So your brain will always try to say, oh, no, I do that all the time, or this is something I will always do. So the same kind of principles apply with tasks, where you can say, okay, these are things that I feel I need to do, or I have to do. And that's even worse. When you hear the word have to do something, that to me sounds like someone else outside is making you do it. It's removing choice. If you have to go to work, well, you don't have to. You need to if you want to pay your bills, but you don't really have to. So it's all about choice. It's about intentionality. But the great thing about essentialism is that by honing down what's on your list, and the only way you can do that, again, is by getting it out and evaluating it, looking at it, then you decide what to pay attention to. So productivity is really not about getting as much done as possible. It's about looking at all the things that you have and then looking at them intentionally and paying attention to those intentions, rather than saying, let me do as many things as possible, and then wondering why you didn't write that book or why you didn't, spend enough time with your family. And it's also about creating boundaries, and that's what essentialism does as well. As he says, you have to basically create these boundaries, and you have to be routinized and ritualized. And it's odd, because most people will think that, well, wait a minute, if I limit myself to how many things I can buy in a year, as Cait was saying, or if I limit, doesn't that make me feel more restricted? That's taking away my freedom. But frameworks foster freedom. Like, if you want to have that freedom to do this, to the things you really want to do, you need to say no to certain things so you can say yes to other things. I love the idea of having boundaries where you say, I don't, if you have a great digital tool would be something to use like send later, where if you want to respond to emails after 5 p.m., fine, fill your boots, but don't actually have them scheduled till send till the next morning, because every time you send an email message after 5 p.m., the message you're also sending is, guess what? I check email after 5 p.m., right? So the other things that I have people do, and that Greg suggests, is you segment. So have a personal email account and have a home email account. Don't filter them into one because it's easier to check one place, because then your brain has to do the work to separate it. Give your brain as little work to do as possible. And that's a lot of what essentialism has to do. Only have what you need, create boundaries, make sure that you're living with intention with your tasks and your mandates, and that way you can pay attention to them and deliver them more consistently and get more of the right things done. Because really, you can check off as many boxes as you want, but if you're not checking off the right boxes, then why are you bothering in the first place?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks. I've heard Mike speak several times, and each time I'm like, that's some good stuff. I told my wife you're going to be here and that you speak on productivity, and she's like, what's that? And I'm like, just let him go. He'll be helpful. He has the microphone, so let's do. We got some time for some questions, and we got to do them into the microphone so they can hear outside and they can hear on YouTube right here.
Hi, Joshua. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, my pleasure.
My name's Stephanie. I'm the president of Professional Organizers in Canada.
Yeah, get out.
So the first thing I want to say is professional organizers are all about having less.
Yeah.
Right? We know that it's way easier to organize what you've got. Even if you want to fold your socks, that's up to you, but it's easier to organize what you've got if you have less stuff. Yeah. My question for you, because I've been in business here on Vancouver Island for a long time, and one of the things we run into all the time is how difficult it is to get rid of stuff in an ethical way. Right? If half of the people in this room go home and say, that's it, I'm going for a minimalist lifestyle, I'm getting rid of my stuff, the charities will shut their doors because they become overwhelmed. So what we face as organizers then, like I know as an organizer, I don't ever go to a charity on Monday morning because they're full. They won't take my stuff. So I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom on the dilemma between we face when we want to help people downsize and the only thing to do with their stuff is take it to the landfill. And on a related question, how you feel about attrition as a method of eventually achieving minimalism.
What do you mean by the second one? Attrition meaning?
Of knowing that you have this goal in mind of having less stuff, but instead of seeking new homes for it or throwing it in the landfill, saying, I'm going to wait until this dress wears out and I'm going to throw it out or turn it into a rag and I will not replace it.
Yeah.
I'm going to wait until those chairs break and I won't replace them.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. Thanks for all the work that you do, Stephanie. Man, fantastic. No, I'm trying to, I don't want to get in trouble for saying anything. This is a small percentage of people, but if it's you, I want to say this. Because for some people, the need to remove things in an ethical way almost becomes a burden to them, where they want to get rid of something, but they don't know who will take it or where it can go, or they can't find a place that, like photographs, right? Like we don't have a good way to recycle photographs yet. And so they keep it, and I try to talk them out of it. I'm like, look, it is what it is. Like the resource has been pulled out of the earth. It's been made into this thing, and eventually it's going to end up somewhere. And if you're burdening yourself by holding on to things in your home just because you can't find the most perfect ethical way to get rid of them, then I think there's a space for just removing that burden and getting rid of them. That being said, man, I get a lot of emails of, hey, how do I recycle this? How do I recycle that? And I always do the same thing. I just Google, how do I recycle trophies? How do I recycle books? And up pop like 15 things, or the website that addresses that one specifically. And so I think the goal is, I think we should do our due diligence. I think we should research. I think we should find out. Like, just ask the question, how do I recycle this? And oftentimes it's not that difficult. But if you're someone that's kind of carrying that burden, like the landfill is your home, and for some reason that's better than somewhere else, I think that you need to kind of free yourself from that, and then just know that you're going to make better choices going forward. In terms of attrition, I think that's a personality one. I think that some people, hey, I've got all these small bottles of shampoo that I got from hotels forever. Should I keep them or should I get rid of them? What do I do with them? I say, how good are you at knowing that you'll use them? How good are you? Like me, I would say that and then I would never use them, and they would just fumble around in my drawer forever. But some people are very good at it. I think some people are very good at wearing out the dress all the way. Some people are good at using through all the little shower things, whatever it might be. If that's you, then by all means go through attrition. Otherwise, if there's some life in it, then pass it on to someone else. I hope that was helpful, Stephanie. Yes? Oh yeah, we gotta do the microphone.
Okay. So I have a lot of kids in my life and my family and friends' kids that I like to go and do things with instead of buying them stuff, because they get a lot of stuff from everybody else in their life. What is the biggest piece of advice that you can pass on when I'm trying to explain to my 4-year-old nephew why Auntie takes him to go paint ceramics as opposed to buying him that plastic truck that he'll never use again? Like, he has fun when we're there, of course, but how do you really instill that value of experience over buying things to kids?
Yeah, I think you set that culture like you have, and you just continue to reinforce that this is what we do. Like this is how we spend our time, and you can explain the reasons why. A 4-year-old, I think can understand enough. I'm a big over-explainer. I think that when it comes to kids, I've always hated the idea of saying because I said so, and that's the reason. Like if I made a decision, there should be a reason behind it, and if I can't explain the reason behind it, then maybe I shouldn't have made that decision. So I would explain to them, and I would just explain over and over again, and then know in the back of your mind that buying the plastic truck is never going to solve his desire to have a plastic truck. Like, you can't ever go down that road of solving envy in a child by buying things, because there's always going to be someone else with something more and something different, and so that's not a solution anyway. And I would set that culture. I think that the kids tend to like, they pick out the culture that we're setting, and this is what our family does. This is what we do in our family. I like to say a lot to my kids. They've probably heard it dozens of times, and just kind of setting that expectation, and then hope for the best. Yeah. Let's do a couple more. It's really hot in here. You guys are lucky out there, by the way. Go ahead.
Okay, I wish that I had a more deep question, but I kind of just really want to know what your living room looks like.
Trying to think if there's a picture online of my living room. My living room has a couch, a chair, there's a coffee table, and there's 2 end tables, a rug, a television, Xbox One, my boy's playing these days, and a clock, and that's what we have in it. I don't know how else to explain it. It's Phoenix, so the colors are very muted, which I kind of like anyway. I don't know if there's pictures online. I do this uncluttered course that people can take, and in the course I do a house tour where I kind of take them around to all the different rooms. So I don't know where to explain where that picture would be. But
that's good. So it's like you have the basic stuff that
yeah.
everybody has, but you don't have like walls of shelving and
right.
magazine baskets.
Yeah. My wife would like a photo behind the television, which, right, you want to put a photo there. I've held off for 5 years. We haven't done it. There's a clock, there's a picture of my son, a picture of my daughter, a picture of our family, and then a picture, when I moved from Vermont, they got me this beautiful photo. So everything in there means something and has a story behind it, even the clock, actually. Let's do these 2, and then we'll stick around so we can still do back and forth personal questions. Go ahead.
You talked about the path to minimalism and the hard questions. Do you have advice for getting past those hard questions? Because they really sometimes are hard.
Oh, do I have, yeah. Man, spend a lot of time alone. Honestly, one of the things that I wrote about often and haven't done as much of was I write a lot about solitude and quiet and stillness. And I don't know who gave the quote, but someone once said, most of man's problems spring back to people not being able to sit alone in a room quietly. That when we're constantly have noise around us, that we're never forced to, we never even have the space, I think, or the time to journey inward. And so I would find time. When I was in college, I had a class where I had to spend 1 hour alone quietly each week. Like 1 hour, I couldn't bring a book, I couldn't bring music, I couldn't watch television, nothing. I just had to sit quietly for an hour. And it was really hard at first, and at second, and at third. But the more you do it, the more you get used to it. And I honestly think that during that semester, I grew as much in who I was as a person and spiritually over the course of that semester than maybe any other period of my life. And it's something that just being able to sit quietly with yourself is difficult, but probably the first step to allowing those questions to bubble up and wrestling with some of those motivations. Yep.
Hi. I just was going to start with 2 little hacks that I use.
Beautiful.
And one is when I'm looking at something, I always ask myself, how am I going to get rid of it when I don't want it anymore? And secondly, I also use Kiva loans as a way to do my online shopping. So if I feel the urge of spending money, I go on Kiva and I look for a loan. And one of the reasons too is like people might have a budget and they might be like, well, this is going to be outside my budget. But since it's a loan, you're not actually losing the money, so that's an excuse to like spend more on Kiva. And my question, though, is I like to go around to local pop-up shops and that kind of thing, and there's a lot of local vendors selling things, and that I find is, you know, you want to support local artists and stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to buy more stuff for your place. So that's where I usually take a picture to remember it, or whatever. Like maybe someday I'll figure out that that's what I want, and I'll want it for a long time. But I find that's a struggle for me, and I don't know if you have any insight on that, on like balancing not buying things versus supporting local business.
Well, they'll probably just take a donation. I mean, you could just give them the money and not walk out with anything. I mean, if that's really a desire to be supporting them, or buy something small and give them a lot for it, or you could buy something and pass it along to someone who you know might benefit from it. I think those would be a few different options that you could do. When we started, I'll just wrap up in a minute here. When we started, I find that a lot of people kind of they're drawn to owning less, but they rush to like the hardest thing in the home to get rid of. And man, don't start with the obstacles. Like start easy. Start with the possibilities. I started by decluttering my car, and then we moved to the living room. Like we started very easy. And then we eventually got to the harder things down the road, whatever that is for you. You don't start there. You start with the easy stuff. I think that you notice the benefits of it when you clean out your car, for example. Clean out your car, and the next time you sit in it, you're like, man, this feels really nice. The living room, the bedroom. Start in those spaces, and then notice how your life is changing, and then that gives you the motivation, the momentum to get to some of those harder places down the road. I need to thank Stream of Consciousness.
We actually have one question from online.
Oh, a question online. Beautiful. Let's do it.
All right, question goes, what do you do when guests' family come to visit? We have to keep 2 guest rooms ready for visits, so we feel we need 3 or 4 bedroom house.
So the question was, what do we do when guests come and stay and we feel like we need to keep 2 guest bedrooms for them? I can attest to this. When we moved to Vermont from the Midwest, we thought we needed a guest bedroom. And so we bought 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. And we used it a couple times when the parents would come. But when we moved to Arizona, we moved into a smaller home, and we had our list of things that we wanted, and we just wanted 3 bedrooms. We did not want a guest bedroom. And 5 years later, it's worked just fine. Like people fit in the spaces that they need to fit in. And so when we have company come to visit, my daughter comes and she sleeps in our room, and the guests use her room. If there's 2 family of guests, then my son comes and sleeps in our room. And that works as well. Or gosh, buying a hotel room a couple times a year is cheaper than that large mortgage payment every single year as well. So man, our houses are way bigger than we need, and we can live in small spaces. It's even more fun if it's not forever with the guests. So thanks for asking that. Let's wrap this up. Thank you for coming. Streamofconsciousness.ca is the website. This is the man, Jason, right here. Thank you so much for hosting us. I'm gonna be right up here signing books. Let's let the people from up front, outside, come through first. Oh, I can go sign outside. Yeah. I will sign outside. Can we get this table out there? That would be perfect. I will sign out there. There's a few books left. We'll take some photos, and I'm all yours. I may have lost my pen. Oh, it's over there. Books, yeah.